The mess hall at Fort Redwood was unusually quiet. 300 soldiers ate beneath the harsh fluorescent lights, boots scuffing softly against the polished floor. At the far end of the room, Private Avery Maddox sat alone, hands folded neatly, eyes lowered, doing everything she could to pass through lunch unnoticed. She shifted her tray, and her paper cup-tipped juice spilling across the table and dripping to the floor. Avery quickly reached for napkins, hoping no one had seen someone had. General Marcus Halverson, walking the aisle during inspection, stopped cold. The entire room went silent. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Small conversations died instantly. Even the air felt like it paused. He glared at her as if she had committed a disgrace. Not a clumsy mistake. "If you can't control a simple drink," he said, voice sharp and cutting, "how will you ever control anything worth protecting?" Avery immediately stood at attention. Halverson's hand cracked across her face. The slap echoed through the steel tables. Her head snapped from the force, but when she looked forward again, her expression hadn't changed. No tears. No reaction. Just stillness. 300 soldiers watched, wide-eyed and silent, before the story continues. Make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories so you never miss powerful stories like this. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Private Avery Maddox was 27. Though here she looked younger, maybe because she rarely spoke, never argued, and existed quietly in every space she entered. Her file painted her as forgettable. Bottom percentile in timed runs, inconsistent in tactical movement. Barely passing weapons qualification, her evaluations use gentle phrases like polite, teachable, works hard military code for she'll never keep up. She always came in last on rifle range times. Her movements lagged by seconds. And she lived in the shadow of louder, stronger recruits. Her silence was mistaken for doubt. Her calmness interpreted as insecurity. She stood just a half step behind formation, not enough for correction. Just enough to vanish. Her uniform was always flawlessly maintained, boots polished to a shine. Sleeves rolled precisely, but everything still seemed slightly too big. Like she wasn't made to fill it. She never volunteered. Never raised her hand. Never stepped forward for demonstrations. Someone joked she could stand between two flags and disappear into the stitching. A corporal once whispered, "She's paperwork waiting to happen," not cruelly, just as a prediction. Her platoon didn't rely on her. They managed her, but there were small inconsistencies. When a recruit dropped a stack of plates one evening, a crash rang across the hall. Most people flinched. Avery didn't, but she shifted. Feet adjusting, shoulders lowering, eyes scanning. Not startled, ready. Instinctively ready. On weapons cleaning days, while others joked, wasted time, or swapped parts, Avery worked with quiet, methodical precision, wiping carbon in exact patterns, rotating cloth edges to avoid contamination. It was unnecessary detail, unless she'd learned it somewhere serious. Sometimes her breathing slowed and steadied. Her posture reset into perfect center alignment, feet evenly spaced, shoulders squared, spine straight, not consciously, but from old conditioning. One night, under the dim emergency strip lights of the gym, she practiced alone. Slow transitions, wrist breaks, hip rotations, redirections, takedown sequences, all without sound, all without striking anything. Movements too refined for a beginner, too fluid to be new. Someone saw her through the glass door as they walked by, but she never knew. If you had seen her practicing like that, quiet in the shadows, what would you have assumed? The first crack in the facada appeared in the field during land navigation. The wind never stopped. The scrub hills drained the strength of even seasoned soldiers. The platoon marched the ridgeline, rucks strapped, compasses out. Following contour lines, Avery trailed near the back, as usual. Her partner, Specialist Tyler Griggs, kept watching her. Broad-shouldered and naturally gifted, he expected her to break any minute. "You want me to take some weight?" he offered, reaching toward her ruck. Avery gave a small, calm shake of her head. "I'm fine, thank you." Griggs frowned. She didn't move like someone struggling. She moved like someone calculating every step, high above them on a rise. General Halverson observed the formation through binoculars. "There," he said, handing them to his major. "Back row. That one." They watched Avery lag several yards behind. She didn't panic or rush, just maintained her steady, measured pace. Enough to pass. Never enough to stand out. Halverson wrote hard strokes into his leather portfolio. Down below, Sergeant Diaz noticed the shrinking time margin and snapped. "Maddox, move. This is a test, not a nature walk." Some soldiers turned to look. Griggs tensed, wanting to defend her, but held himself back. Defending her only made things worse. Avery simply nodded. "Roger, Sergeant." At the rally point, Diaz confronted her. "Every second we lose is because of you. Understand?" "Yes, Sergeant." She returned to formation, emotionless. Somehow, her calm acceptance made others feel guilty without knowing why. The second crack came in the live stress simulation. The chaos hall where alarms blared, gunfire echoed, smoke-filled corners, and squads navigated shifting threats. Avery's squad moved through a corridor just as the scenario escalated in coming fire. Red strobes, smoke, a casualty in the open with a ticking timer. Avery had run drills like this, where the smoke was real and the blood was not fake. Die but here. She hesitated on purpose. She froze in the doorway. Her hands looked unsure, though they weren't shaking. "Grab his feet." Someone yelled. She delayed. Just enough for the simulator to record additional casualty hits. Indicators flashed. The system counted lost lives. "Damn it, Maddox. We lost 3 because you locked up." The scenario reset. Lights shifted. Blank fire smoke lingered. In the observation booth, Halverson stared through the glass. Jaw tight. He pointed at the freeze frame on the playback. Avery frozen in the doorway. "That hesitation," he said coldly. "That is what gets people killed." The captain next to him tried offering a mild defense. "Sir, these are training reps." She could improve with what? Halverson snapped. "More time being shielded by her squad? More leaders pretending effort is enough?" He tapped the glass. "She is what's wrong with this entire program. We train around our weakest link, and we pay for it." Down on the floor, Avery stood apart as the squad received critique. No yelling. They didn't need to. Sergeant Carter focused on communication and confidence. Others nodded, eyeing Avery subtly. She accepted everything quietly. "Understood, Sergeant." Inside her mind, Avery replayed every motion, every angle, every sound from the last drill. She didn't blame herself for losing 3 simulated lives. Her thoughts drifted instead to nights when the risk had been real. When moving an inch too fast, or a breath too slow carried, consequences that didn't reset with a buzzer. The third crack in her composure came during the final round of the company's physical evaluation. Sunrise washed Fort Redwood in pale orange, the kind of morning that should have felt fresh. But pressure hung in the air like humidity. This was the last run before results became permanent. Platoons lined the track, commanders watching with clipboards, stopwatches swinging from lanyards. General Halverson stood near the finish line, posture rigid, expression carved from stone. The whistle blew. The formation surged forward in waves. Boots thudded in rhythm, breathing controlled but edging toward strain. Avery began at the back, as she always did, her stride smooth. Deliberately shortened, conserving energy she didn't actually need to save. As the pace settled, the runners spread into clusters. She could have moved up easily. Her legs begged her to. That familiar heat used to fuel missions and timed but she let her breathing sound heavier than it was, allowed the gap between her and the leaders to widen instead of close. A few soldiers noticed. Specialist Griggs glanced back, saw her slipping behind, and instinctively eased his pace. Others near him matched him, their adjustments small but deliberate. No one called out encouragement. No one made it obvious. They simply refused to let her fall alone to the rear. Halverson saw it tan to him. Their quiet loyalty was a direct insult. A half-dozen strong soldiers sacrificing their times just to keep Avery from appearing like the only straggler. In his eyes was a slow-spreading infection. Compassion, where he believed only ruthless standards should exist. By the final lap, sweat ran down every face, and breathing came in sharp pulls. Avery kept her calculated struggle alive, crossing the line just above the failing threshold. Those who slowed for her finished seconds later, clapping her shoulder with breathless sincerity. "Nice work, Maddox. You finished strong," she replied softly, nodding once. A simple word. "Thanks." From a few yards away, Halverson watched with a scowl deep enough to crack granite. To him, this wasn't camaraderie. It was weakness disguised as unity. He turned, simmering, and ordered the company to assemble in the hallway outside the gym. The walls were lined with old unit photos, commendations, and flags carried into war. A place meant to inspire pride. Avery took her usual spot near the back, breath returning to steady intervals. Her cheeks flushed, uniform damp at the collar. She blended back into the formation, the unremarkable shadow she had mastered becoming. Halverson entered, each bootstep sharp enough to cut conversation in half. Helmets tucked under arms, spines straightened, heads turned. His gaze swept the ranks until it locked onto her. "Maddox," he barked. "Front and center." She stepped forward, boots clicking, stopping in a small circle of space created by the parting formation. Fluorescent lights made everything feel harsher, unforgiving. When Halverson stopped in front of her, the height and rank difference made the moment feel like a sentencing. "Do you think this army owes you protection?" His voice echoed off the walls. Avery kept her eyes fixed just below his chin, exactly where regulation instructed. Her breathing calm, her hands steady, her expression unmoved. "No, sir," she answered lightly. The softness of her voice shifted something in the hallway. A few soldiers let out nervous snickers, not sure if she was fearless or clueless. Someone whispered, "She doesn't get it," Halverson heard. He hated it. He didn't want humor. He wanted discomfort, apology, public shame. Instead, he got calm accountability with no hint of victimhood. Her composure irritated him more than tears ever could. He clenched his jaw, stepped back, and addressed the formation. "This is not a charity. You are not here to warp standards for whoever is struggling. Those days are over." No one moved. No one spoke. Avery returned to her place with quiet steps, standing at the rear as though nothing had changed. But something had. The gap between Halversons, the idea of a soldier and the reality of who Avery was, had widened into a space neither fully understood. If you had been there watching a general confront the quietest soldier in the building, would you have spoken for her or stayed silent? Later that afternoon, the training yard fell into its usual lull between drills and evening formation. Soldiers sprawled along the bleachers, loosening laces, wiping dust away. Staff Sergeant Elena March stood near the equipment cage, organizing the last returns. Her eyes drifted toward a far bench where Avery sat alone, wrapping her wrists slowly, precisely. But something about the technique was wrong. Not incorrect wrong for who Avery was supposed to be. The tape wasn't standard athletic strip. It was braided cloth, patterned in a style March had only seen during specialized grappling training for advanced close-quarters operators. The kind of training that taught you to protect your joints when a mistake meant dying faster, not losing points. Avery anchored the tape, folded it inward, tightened it with practiced memory. She wasn't practicing. She was remembering range day came later that week. A stiff crosswind warped the firing lines, tugging targets like loose sails in a storm. Sergeant Finch lectured about maintaining hold and resisting overcorrection. Soldiers took their positions. Avery paused not to aim, but to study the wind flag over lane 9. Finch moved past her, correcting another shooter when Avery murmured without looking up, "Sir, shift your shoulder. The wind isn't pushing left, it's folding." Finch frowned, assuming she misunderstood the terminology. "Just focus on your basics, Maddox." "Yes, sir." Later, reviewing the targets, Finch saw the drift, the strange left pull, followed by immediate right correction. Exactly the pattern she'd described. Her observation had been right. Yet, she hadn't corrected her own shots. She hadn't demonstrated anything. She'd stayed comfortably average. Finch stared at her target. How did she see that? He whispered. No one answered. In the medical wing, something else surfaced. During routine vitals, a nurse lifted Avery's collar to place a stethoscope and paused. A thin, symmetrical scar traced above the clavicle surgical. Precise, unmistakably from trauma stabilization or field extraction, not accident. Burn? The nurse offered, though she already knew the answer. No, ma'am. Avery gave no explanation, simply lowered her collar again. Scars like that didn't appear on 27-year-olds without a story. Rumors bloomed quietly. Soldiers noticed the tape on her wrist, the scar, her wind call. The way she carried herself like someone trained somewhere far more severe than Fort Redwood. A senior enlisted spotted a faded serial number near her wrist knot, a platoon code, not an exercise label. It belonged to a classified combatives program. He didn't confront her, just stared longer than protocol allowed. Whispers started threading through the cracks. She raps like she's protecting brakes. Did you see the scar? She corrected wind drift before anyone else did. You don't learn that here. Eventually someone said what everyone else was thinking. She wasn't always a private. A proof. No accusations. Just a theory floating in the silence. Because Fort Redwood had two kinds of soldiers. Those sent here to sharpen them. Those sent here to disappear. No one knew which one. Avery was near 2,300 hours. The incident happened. Yard lights dimmed. Stragglers loading equipment back inside. Wind rattled the scaffold from the afternoon exercise. A few trainees stayed behind, stacking barricades and tarps. Private Ellison climbed the scaffold to unclip cam netting. Careless in the way, only youth allowed. He tugged, leaned harder, and the metal brace under his boot shifted. The side rail jerked downward. It wasn't enough to kill boot, enough to break bones, enough to land wrong. He pitched sideways. Avery moved before he even yelled. Not frantic, precise. She stepped in, lowered a knee, aligned her spine, squared her hips. Her hand caught his wrist with perfect control, redirecting his fall into her center line. She rotated his weight exactly 60 degrees, lowering him into her stabilizing posture. The angle protected his shoulder. Her foot slid back to carry the impact. He landed upright against her forearm. No crack. No slam. No pain. Ellison blinked. What just happened? You're fine, Avery said evenly. Watch your footing next time. She stepped away as if she'd simply handed him a dropped pen. No waiting for thanks. No glance around, but someone saw. Captain Joel McKinley stood at the corner of the loading dock, clipboard tucked under his arm. A man who rarely reacted, but who knew exactly when something important had happened. He knew that maneuver, black level, reserved for instructors who had served in real war zones. A corrective fall technique used on rooftops, metal platforms, alleyways, and zero visibility places. Where mistakes meant funerals, Avery had done it like muscle memory. McKinley stared long after she walked away. Not fearful, recognizing something undeniable. She wasn't learning how to survive. She already had. And whoever trained her hadn't done it here. He didn't speak up. Not yet. He waited. He watched, and by morning, quiet murmurs had already begun drifting through the platoon. Ellison mentioned what he'd seen. Someone repeated it. Someone else added a twist. By midday, the rumor had settled into shape knot. Sensational, just unnerving. Maddox caught him mid-fall. Known, not caught. Corrected his angle. Stabilized him without impact, like she'd predicted the trajectory before he slipped. The rumors didn't grow louder. They grew quieter. Laughter faded. Confidence drained. People watched her differently, not mocking anymore, but calculating. During chow, a few soldiers avoided sitting near her, not out of dislike, but because their assumptions about her no longer felt reliable. When Avery climbed the barracks stairs, troops shifted aside, not respectfully, but instinctively, like their bodies understood something their minds hadn't caught up to. Avery felt the shift. She didn't react. She just grew quieter in a different way, not the silence of fear, but the silence of someone hiding for a reason. McKinley didn't confront her. Instead, he went into the personnel system and opened her file. His access wasn't unlimited, but it was enough to see the truth. The file wasn't incorrect. It was missing. Half her early service was redacted. Training courses listed, but no instructors. Completion reports with no evaluation scores. Deployment credits without locations. Transfers signed by offices outside the standard chain. A demotion recorded under sealed justification. He stared longer than protocol allowed. He didn't print anything. Didn't save anything. He closed the file, knowing one thing. Asterisk, what was erased had been erased on purpose. Avery didn't know he looked tanned. He chose not to expose her. Not yet. Not publicly. Instead, McKinley watched. He saw her fail intentionally, not dramatically, but precisely. Just enough to blend in. When squads split, she chose the weaker group. When leadership volunteers were requested, she stepped back ever so slightly. She wasn't incompetent. She was hiding. And people only hide skill when someone, somewhere, once taught them that being visible was dangerous. The platoon didn't understand that. They only felt the edge of it, the unease that comes from seeing something impossible and knowing it hints at something larger. That evening, under the orange floodlights, a quiet whisper passed through formation. She wasn't always a private. That single possibility changed everything. The IVACO and General Marcus Halverson stood in front of the assembled companies. His voice was sharp, slicing through the hall. Before we begin, we must address a recurring weakness in this battalion. He pointed to the projected chart time logs. Performance curves, one column heavy with red marks. This, he said, is what happens when we lower standards to accommodate failure. Then he spoke her name. Private Avery Maddox. Step forward. Shoulders tensed. Everyone braced for the usual public humiliation. Avery stepped forward, calm, neutral, steady. Halverson continued. This soldier demonstrates hesitation, lack of initiative. And sir, someone interrupted. The hall froze. Captain Joel McKinley stepped out of formation, posture rigid. With respect, sir, before those statements are finalized, I need clarity on one matter. Halverson frowned. State it. McKinley turned to Avery. No drama. No emphasis. Private Maddox, were you ever credentialed under the Raven Sea Combatives program? One sentence. That was enough. Avery didn't flinch. Didn't widen her eyes. Didn't show surprise. Her answer was quiet, plain yes, sir. The temperature in the room shifted. Halverson faltered. The major stopped writing. Soldiers whispered. Raven Sea. A program spoken about like myth. Only 27 ever qualified. Operatives assigned to missions that didn't officially exist. Graduates never placed in basic training units afterward. And ever quiet. Overlooked. Avery had just confirmed she was one of them. McKinley said nothing more. He stepped back into formation. Silence collapsed across the hallway. Halverson tried to recover. But authority had already slipped through his hands. The mess hall inside in. The next day the mess hall looked the same. But everyone inside had changed. Avery sat alone at the end of a row. A cup tipped liquid spilling across the tray. A quiet sound, but everyone heard it. Everyone remembered the first spill and everything that followed. General Halverson, still stinging from the previous day's humiliation, walked toward her. Soldiers instinctively moved aside. He grabbed her wrist tight, controlling, asserting dominance. 5 seconds followed. 1. Avery shifted her feet subtle. Angled, balanced. 2. Her free hand redirected his wrist, turning his own weight against him. 3. A rotation of her hip knot force. Just precision. 4. His balance collapsed. He fell harder than his pride could comprehend. 5. He tapped the floor twice, then a gout of panic. McKinley stepped forward. Release him, Maddox, she did instantly. No triumph. No emotion. Just regulation posture. Halverson gasped for air, unable to rise without help. Silence filled the hall. No laughter. No insults. No smirks. Every soldier saw the truth. She hadn't overpowered him. She had controlled him. And she'd done it without anger. Ellison, the same soldier she saved, was to attention and saluted her. Others followed. Not command. Not protocol. Respect. Real respect. Her deeper tree, finished her meal, cleared her tray, and walked out. No pride. She retrieved a sealed envelope from her locker and signed her voluntary reassignment. No one objected. No one dared. A plain government vehicle arrived the next morning. No markings. No unit patches. No farewells. She stepped inside and disappeared back into the quiet world where ranks aren't worn. Missions aren't logged, and names don't matter. The LAGIC Fort Redwood changed. Policies shifted. No more humiliation-based discipline. Evaluations now screened for hidden advanced credentials. Peer systems emphasized capability, not punishment. No memo mentioned her name. But everyone knew why these reforms existed. Instructors retold her story, the quiet private. The one no one noticed. The one who moved like she didn't belong here because she didn't. They never exaggerated the takedown. They didn't need to. Real strength needs no embellishment. Avery faded into the unseen world again, but her silence lingered. A reminder. Sometimes the quiet one isn't weak. Sometimes the overlooked one isn't struggling. Sometimes the person you dismiss is the one you should fear or follow. And sometimes, heroes don't announce themselves at all.